Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
And Tane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. Welcome back, Tana. We've missed you over the last few weeks. What's been filling your basket of knowledge?
Yeah, I think obviously I've missed a couple of episodes and it's definitely been timely, definitely been wanting to get on, but just been quite busy obviously within my coaching space and also within my job as grants coordinator. It has ebbs and flows and it's just been obviously like most things, something has to give in those busy periods. Not that I wanted to give up the podcast by choice, but so I guess coaching's been filling my cup a lot. I've had experiences right from coaching an under 14s team that came together within a week, combining three different teams and going away to have quite an epic experience there. Right through to my first international experience with rugby league and winning the championship final, which was an incredible moment for the girls of Niue who have quite a small player base, and because of that, it's quite a historic moment for those girls to get their first one, particularly in that girls' space. So that's definitely filled my basket. But I guess probably my learning over that period too is you've got to find ways to ground yourself, as you can probably relate to, Prajesh. With your previous role being here, there, everywhere, and not really having a place to call home as such. Really just finding moments within those days, within those busy periods to go, what grounds me, what's going to keep me in check each day, regardless of where I am. So that was probably my biggest learning over that time. And then probably on the flip side of that is just in those moments where everything's going right. I think when you're growing up or just in life, you try to, sometimes you go, oh, everything's too good to be true. And we almost wait for, where's something that's going to go wrong. But really just, for me going, well, actually, you don't get these moments very often. And changing that mindset for me to go, actually, let's enjoy every single, second of this, because I know that there's a lot of people that would love to be in that position within their passion. And you don't always get those. So, some awesome learnings for me in the last couple of months.
Yeah, lots of learnings and I get good excuses for you not being on the podcast. We'll let you go with that bit, but some great learnings there for you. My learning over the last week, I have a home now. I live in Auckland and I've been here for 3 weeks consistently. What a great novelty that is. For those of you that know me, I'm never in a place for more than 5 days. So it's pretty novel. But my learning was something that was reminded me yesterday. I was on a well-being seminar and the facilitator spoke about stress. And she spoke about how stress is always viewed as a negative, but it was a reminder that actually we all need positive stress in our lives. We need a stress in our life called eustress. I don't know that. So there's a eustress and there's stress. So eustress is all the positive stress that, when you go to the gym, you're stressing your body so it can grow. You need sometimes when you have to hand an assignment, you get the stress to hand an assignment. So there's the eustress, but there comes a point that's a tipping point when that good stress becomes bad stress. And too often in our life, I think we all do this here, we forget about where the tipping point is, and then we just focus on the bad stress. And then we have this narrative about stress being bad all the time. But actually, for us to be successful in anything that we do, we need some stress in our life to get things going. And sometimes, a lot of people change their life because they have a thing that happens in their life, some moment that happens in their life, which is their stressor. And it could be the fact that, they have a health condition. It could be they find out about a financial situation. It could be the fact that, hey, things are not working the way out and you need the stressor. And that was just a reminder to me that, hey, stress is good when it's captured in the right narrative. So that was my reminder, my learning, and something that I've got to think about as well as we go forward. But hey, it's not about you, it's not about me, and we could monologue forever and ever and ever, but that's not about us. For those of you that listen to us all the time, we scour the country to find people that we think are amazing. We also scour the world because we think everyone is amazing and has a story to tell. And for those of you that are new, welcome to our podcast. Hopefully, you find this interesting and subscribe to our podcast. But hey, today it's my privilege and our honor and our real excitement to invite our guest on. I've met our guest a few years ago, and I haven't spoken to them for a very long time, but I've been following them on their social media, following their journey, and from what I see on the socials, they've done some really cool things. But as we all know, socials are just one tiny part of someone's life. There's a lot more going on, which is why I'm really excited to hear the story that has brought our guests to where they are today. Welcome to Baskets of Knowledge, Jay, and thanks for joining us.
Shoulder, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, it's
Yeah,
our pleasure. Jay, for those of you who don't know anything about you, do you want to tell us a bit about who you are at this point in time in life?
I'm a student studying at Massey University, and in tangent with studying, I'm also working on a lot of artwork. Not just music. I think a lot of people label me as a musician, as a rapper, but I'm trying to steer clear of that because I'm really interested in multifaceted design beyond just music. I really enjoy the whole process of the artwork. I like film, and I'm just trying to get into creativity as a journey and a collective narrative. So
I,
that's a
I I
little bit
love
about
I
me.
love that because as you said, a lot of people see the music side of you, but music is a creative outlet, and there's lots more than just music and creativity. And I guess before we even get down the pathway of where you're at the moment and where you're heading to go, if when I spoke to you all those years ago, and I would have said, "Hey Jay, in a few years' time, this is the pathway you'll be going down," what would you have said to me at that point in time when we first met all those years ago?
When I met you, I was not entirely sure about pursuing music. I was kind of in a mental battle between whether or not I wanted to study architecture or whether I wanted to study music. And I was considering various places across the country. Um, I was looking at music at Otago, music at Aro in Christchurch, and music up here in Wellington. And then I was also potentially looking at architecture. I was leaning more towards music, but I feel like switching from the conventional architecture path, which felt very safe to me, to doing something like music where I had a little bit less stability, but I felt I would be more content in the long run. It's probably the best decision I've ever made. So that's how I've changed a little bit since meeting you.
And
Yeah.
that's really hard, right? As you said before, architecture stable, you get into their stability galore status, family, hey, cool, awesome. But music, as you said, it's so fickle,
Mm.
it's so hard, And how did you navigate that? You said you have the passion, but what about those around you that might have gone, "Hey Jay, what are you doing here?" Architecture, nice and stable, music, question mark.
I feel like a lot of people were looking at what I was doing with the short-term benefit in mind. You see architecture and you're like, well, a lot of architecture students, straight out of university, you're pretty much guaranteed a job. Whereas with music, you really have to focus and ensure that that's the path that you want to be doing. Because I feel like a lot of people say they're into music, but very few people are actually into music at the same extent that you'd want to be if you want to turn it into a career. And I think that people suggesting that I focus more on architecture kind of started to take me more seriously as a musician after I started releasing music consistently. And that was a big hurdle in and of itself mentally because being being a perfectionist and having to compare myself to all of the Instagram highlight reels that we see can make it very daunting to release music or to share your creative processes with the world in the first place. And I think getting over that hurdle and releasing music was the first step in getting people to realize, wow, he's actually serious about pursuing music as a career. So, yeah.
And I love that because it's short term versus reality, but also as you said before, you're into music or you're into music. There's two very different ways of that into. And where did the other creative spin come on. So, we focus on the music here, but as you said right at the start, music is only one of the feathers in your creative world. And how did you start going, actually, let me explore art, and I guess other me forms of media for creativity?
Well, when you release music, especially in today's society, you need to do a whole bunch of different things, such as like creating your album artwork, promoting it on Instagram. I just didn't have any money. And so I was forced to do it myself. And that taught me very, very valuable skills. I'm really grateful that I put myself in a position where I could learn and I could challenge myself to do all of these extra things beyond just creating my music because they've become like a real passion to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's so true. It's necessity breeds innovation.
Mm.
You have no money, you have no choice. You're like, if I want to be successful, I have to learn. I have to learn, and I
Mhm.
think about developing countries that people do stuff, but they have no access to the stuff that we have access to here, and they still get things done. And same thing, like I said before, if you had the money, would you have gone down that creative path that would have? Question mark, we don't know. You might have gone, I'm just going to
Mm.
pay someone else to do my artwork for me. And so that's really, really, really interesting. But one thing I really want to touch on, because as I was doing my research for today's podcast, one thing that I saw in a lot of your little profiles everywhere was your homage to your mixed culture upbringing, your mixed race upbringing. And let's talk
Yeah.
about that then. How's that navigated or been an influence in your life? And yeah, what cultures do you call yourself, I guess? I mean, again, the word labels are really quite tough, but
Mm.
we live in a world where everybody has got a mix of everything, I guess. What are your
Yeah.
what is your story, I guess?
So my mother was born in Delhi, India, and my father was born in Nelson, New Zealand. And so growing up, I always had to deal with the fact that I felt too white for the Indian people and I felt too Indian for the white people. And I often got confused in that regard. People didn't know how to label me. They wanted to label me, they wanted to put me in a box. And part of my creative journey and something that my creativity has really helped me express has been accepting both sides as more than just halves. I'm not half Indian and I'm not half Pakeha. I am Indian and I'm Pakeha simultaneously. And that's something that I see more and more people, young people particularly of mixed race heritage, adopting. And it's really, really powerful to see that happen because, my whole life I grew up and I didn't learn Hindi. My mother made like great efforts to try teach me Hindi, but I can't speak it to this day. I'm working on it. It's something that in the near future I'm trying to develop towards. But it was always seen as like a big failing point for me that I wasn't able to connect with that part of my culture, that I wasn't able to be Indian enough in that sense. And I think while I navigate that and while I learn Hindi and while I learn more about my culture, music has helped me express that frustration and felt heard, not necessarily felt heard by other people, but felt heard by myself and felt heard by God. So, yeah, that's how my heritage comes into everything that I do.
I love the way you said that, because I've always struggled with the fact when people say to me they are 43% this and 7%
Mm.
this. I'm like, What does it actually mean? Like, what does that actually mean?" And I love the way you said, there's no such thing as 50% this and 50, you're 100%, whatever your 100% is. As you said, you're 100%
Mm.
of both your mum and your dad's, whatever they've given you, it's 100% you. So it's really beautiful. That's awesome that people are beginning to acknowledge that there. But as you said before, the world we live in is about boxes. You've got to fit into a certain box, and you've got to, if you don't fit in the box, then what do you do? And I struggle with that as well, because I look Indian.
Mhm.
My name is Indian, but I
Yeah.
grew up in Africa. So when I'm filling up the boxes, I'm like, what do I fill out? Am I Indian? Am I
Mm.
African? It's so weird. I just go other, because I'm a mixture of both. And what percentages, who cares about percentages? Because also it's not just about your parental birth, it's also about where you call home, where you were brought up, and that also
Mm.
has an influence on how you identify yourself. But I also
Definitely.
empathize with you about learning Hindi. I was like, oh damn it, I should learn Hindi.
Yeah. It's been something I've been looking into a lot more recently. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's become really more apparent to me, and I've said this in many podcasts before that it's awesome that in New Zealand we are encouraged to learn te reo, but my internal dialogue is I'm learning te reo, which is fantastic, but I don't even know my own heritage, my own language. Isn't that like a lie? Like it's like this is such a fraud. Like for me that's a conversation I have with myself in my
I felt the exact same thing because in high schools, year 9 and 10, taking a language at my high school was compulsory,
yeah.
and they had a selection of European languages, and so I went with Spanish. And to this day, I can still speak Spanish better than I can speak Hindi, and it's a very confusing like place to be in. So
Yeah.
yeah, feel you on that one.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. But again, it's just because you fit into certain norms that are acceptable at a certain time. And I think the world is changing at this point.
Mm.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I guess when you left school, what is your journey after you left school? Was it a conventional pathway for you, or did you dabble in a couple of things before you decided what you wanted to do?
I think that I almost left school before school ended.
Yeah.
By the time that year 13 had started wrapping up, I already knew that. So this was shortly after I met you, a few months after I met you. I knew that music was where I wanted to go. And so I put all of my efforts towards making music. My classmates can tell you, I was just in class. Everyone else was doing their physics work. I was just making beats. I was just focused on that. And so I think I'm really blessed in the sense that straight after I technically finished high school, I just went, after that summer, I went straight into university focusing on music. And I didn't really feel that much confusion because all of that confusion in terms of what pathway I was going to take really occurred the year before while I was still in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what did it feel like for you when you released your first single and it got traction? Because I asked that question because humans seek validation, and whether we like it or not, it's validation, right? And
Yeah.
you might go, "This is amazing," but what does the world see? What is that like for you?
It felt very surreal because I've been working on this track for months. Some people tell me about how they make songs in a couple of hours, they make songs in a couple of days. For me, it takes months. I'm constantly going back, redrafting stuff, and it's a real struggle sometimes. And so by the time that the song came out, one, I was completely sick of the song. I didn't want to hear it anymore. I'd heard it too many times. My ears were absolutely fried. But number two, it felt really weird to have something that was not finished, but released, because nothing's ever really finished.
Yeah.
But it was out there and people could listen to. And in regards to the traction, I to this day, that single is the best tracking song by itself that I put out. And it felt very, very weird to have people around me, people that I didn't know me, and then also know this song that I had put out that at the time and still is a very vulnerable song about how I was feeling and how I was quite confused. So
Yeah, and I guess
yeah,
that's maybe people relate to that because a lot of people feel that, but are afraid, as you said before, it's an expression how people feel. That is your expression, and
yeah.
I love what you said there. As people know you, but you don't know who they are. It's
Mm,
it's it's quite crazy. It's quite a crazy thing when you think about that. It's like celebrities or presidents, or like you, for example. Like, everyone knows who they are, but they don't know who you are. You don't know
mm.
from a bar of soap, essentially, which is
It
pretty
feels
crazy.
so weird. Yeah, it feels like I should know them and I want to know them, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the time will come at some point when you will know them, but hey, maybe not, and that's okay.
Mm,
And that's
yeah.
okay. And I guess, and what is that like for your family to see you being successful in this space here? And I ask this because this is an assumption again, sometimes in traditional Indian families,
Mm,
this is not the status quo. They go, well, what's going on here? Okay, great, this is a great hobby, well done. Um, um, yeah, I mean. I could be totally wrong. In your family might be very different, but
Mm.
I'm just thinking about what I've experienced in different scenarios.
Mm. I think that families, Indian families as well, but families in general just want to see their children and see their young people succeed. And so they were very scared for me when I told them that I was going to take music and study music. But when they saw that I was serious about what I was doing, once again, when I started releasing music, then they started to realize that it was worth it. They started to realize that I was trying to engage with interesting thought in the music that I'm making. Still got a long way to go in terms of my writing, but yeah,
And
that's
was it like,
mostly how I felt.
yeah, as a young person, how did you get studio time? How did you get people to start taking you seriously to give you some time to actually, that's another beast altogether.
Mm. I'm very blessed that in Christchurch, where I grew up, where I was based up
Yeah.
until last year, I had access to a community studio in the Tauranga Central Public
Oh,
Library,
really?
which was completely free to use for educational purposes and had some amazing staff members who really helped me become not only more comfortable with the music that I was making and showing that to other people, but also with experimenting with music that was more true to myself. At the beginning of my production process in terms of making music, I was more focused on making music that I thought other people would like. And the people at Turanga really helped me craft music that was truer to myself. So that was how I initially did it. But after that point, obviously, since moving up here, I've had access, very blessed to have access to the university equipment, the university recording studios, which are incredible and which I use more than I should. But yeah, so that's I think it's just things falling in the right places for me. I know other people who haven't had it as easy but have made better music than me. I know people who have access to better equipment but don't make as much music or aren't as passionate about it. And I think it's less about the equipment and the access to the spaces that we have and more about how much we are committed to using what we do have. Because anybody, if you're living in New Zealand, anybody can get access to this stuff. It's just how hard you want it. You'll have a friend who'll have a microphone lying around. You have a music teacher, your friend's music teacher, your friend's uncle will have this equipment. It's how bad you want it and how hard you chase after it ultimately.
And that's so true, and that can be put into any context, like if I think about
Mhm.
Tane and his girls that he coaches, there's a field anyway. There's a field anyone can go and play rugby. And what is the difference between those that actually take it to the next level versus those who just stop? And I guess Tana, you navigate that because you work with really young
Yeah,
wahine.
yeah, definitely. And I think it's an interesting space to navigate. And I guess that's probably a question for you, Jay, is around how, like, when did that switch flick for you, to have that mindset? Because I guess, it's all good for you to say it now when when things are going well, like me with the coaching, I can go, oh, it's hunky dory. But, behind the scenes, there's obviously a lot of time, a lot of commitment. There's times where you are going to struggle and you are going to question why you're doing it in the first place. So I guess, yeah, what allowed you to change that narrative for yourself, especially as you were growing up, with all those other challenges that you were navigating at the same time.
It's interesting that you asked that question at the moment because recently, and we can get into this later, but since releasing the album, I have been struggling to find my objective moving forward and struggling to find my reason for doing what I do. And I think that I've kind of fallen off in the sense of discipline and the sense of motivation. And I think initially, what got me to the point where I could sit down, make music, and continue to make music to the point where I was happy with it and I could release it was the feeling that I can't afford to lose. I've locked in the fact that I'm studying music at a university. My mum's made me promise that I'm going to finish my bachelor at least before I drop out or do something else. I can't afford to lose. I have to make music and I have to make good music because at the time, moving up to Wellington, I didn't have a job secured. It took me like 6 months to get another job. So I was just off savings. So I was had to A, get a job, and B, do well enough with music that eventually it can become my job. I'm still nowhere near that point. It's still going to be a few more years until I reach that point, hopefully. But that was the mindset that I had at the time. It was also largely, and I wouldn't recommend this, but it was largely ego driven in the sense that I had to prove that I'm not just another SoundCloud rapper, that I'm actually somebody who's trying to engage with people's thoughts and get them to think about what they're listening to. And that's another thing we can get into later if you'd like about the
Yeah.
state of music at the moment and where I think that needs to go. But
Yeah, totally. That's a great answer because there's two things there. The one thing was, hey, it was again need. You had a need to do this. You promised your mum there's a need. But the second one, I think, is probably the bigger one that we all have. It's the ego. Whether it's posting stuff on LinkedIn or posting stuff on SoundCloud or posting, you just become a noise amongst everything else. And
mm,
you go, right, actually, I don't want to just be noise. I actually want to validate myself by actually doing this here because that is true. As much as we like to say, no, there's no ego here, that's a lie. Every single one of us in this world has ego. Every single one of us does stuff because we want to prove to the world or to our world that, hey, we're doing this because we're different. And we are
there's a
different.
different, like, there's definitely a tipping point
Yeah.
there. There's a point where you can use a competitive nature and you can use, I've got some friends who are very, very talented in music themselves. And so we had a little bit of a competition at one point where we were trying to post every day. And you can use that, but when it goes too far and when you start trying to be better than somebody else,
Yeah.
that's where ego starts to harm you more than it helps you, if that
Totally.
makes sense.
Totally. It's a bit
Yeah.
like the analogy with stress, ego is great up to a point, and then when it takes
Mm,
over, then it's when stress takes over, ego takes over, then you're in trouble. Because then you
mm,
forget why you're actually doing whatever you're doing. Yeah,
mhm.
let's go into that that great topic there. Let's talk about the state of music and what do you think about the state of music at this point in time from a J perspective.
Mhm. I think that music is too commercialized. And I think that people have started, no matter what your perspective on music is, because I understand some people make music to engage with people's thoughts, and other people make music simply to entertain and to get people to, vibe with the music. I'm not saying one is better than the other. Obviously, I prefer making music that engages with people's thoughts, but no matter which avenue you like to go down, I think that the music industry has become more focused on pumping that out as fast as possible and promoting it to a point where you have to stand out from the rest of social media, as you mentioned before, and less about crafting the art and spending more time on creating the music. And I think it's really interesting when we see artists like Drake, for example, releasing long, long albums multiple times a year, when I know that Drake has made some incredible records in the past. I know Drake's a bit of a controversial topic at the moment, but where he's made incredible records in the past because he spent a lot of time crafting them. But now I feel almost as if his current records are rushed just for mass appeal. So yeah, that's why creating the album for me took such a long time. Took about, I wanted to, I had the idea of creating an album about 2 years before the album came out. And the final product of the album was only like the first beat that I made that ended up on the final album was made about a year and a half before the album came out. And so I see people who are creating albums in 6 months, and I wonder what would happen and how their craft would turn out if they just let it breathe a little bit more.
And that's so true. I think about that in a lot of facets in life, but we talk about music, it is a craft, and how do you just produce so much so quickly? when there's no real story. And you think about the amount of cricket that's out there at the moment. It's not a craft anymore. It's appealing to the masses. You think about, the amount of rugby that's available out there. It's just like it's like a train station. People just come and go. There's no depth. There's no but that's just again a perspective, and I'm glad you brought that up because if you think about all the greats in music, there's a story. You think about I think about songs that my dad played, but they stuck with me because those songs have a story. They're really there's something in there. And I think about music today. I'm like, actually, I don't really know much music today because it just comes and goes. And next week they've got another single. But yeah, that's a great perspective there. And I guess I'm gonna now touch on your album. I see for those of you watching on YouTube and maybe on Spotify, you're wearing your album, the album top, the Echoes. Do you want to
Yes.
tell us about the name? How did you come with the name Echoes? And was there a theme to your album that you wanted to bring across strongly in the music you're releasing?
So on the name, the name came about quite late in the album production process. And the album was a bunch of songs that was me trying to figure out who I was. And the name of the album, Echoes, refers to how I see myself or I saw myself as just trying to be something I wasn't, trying to be an echo of somebody else. That's where the name comes from. And I think that in creating the album, all of the pieces kind of came together in that sense. What was your second question? Sorry, you had a
Yes, yeah.
follow-up.
Sorry. So there was too many questions there. That was bad.
No,
I
you're
guess
all
I
right.
get. I guess the question was there a certain theme that you're going for with your music with this album? Was it did you make a concerted effort to go ahead? This is what I want the album to focus on.
I wanted it to be I wanted to focus on my journey in figuring out who I was, but it wasn't very simple in doing so. There were a bunch of different iterations of the album. There were some that were more family oriented, and ultimately, the final version of the album was focused more on the theme of community because everybody says, oh, you need a community. But I think people try to generalize that and try to be, well, I need to be accepted by this race. I need to be accepted by this culture. I need to be accepted by this entire country. And one of the things that I tried to weave in through my mum's spoken segments throughout the album was that ultimately your community can be two people. Your community can be your family. Your community can be the couple friends from across the road that you spend some time with occasionally. And that is who you are. If you are shaping their lives and you're making a difference to them, what does it matter if you don't need to change an entire generation as long as you're making an impact on one person and as long as that impact is in line with your values, then based off that alone, you should know who you are and you know who you are. So that's the theme of the album, I think.
And that is so powerful because we live in a world at the moment where we're bombarded by what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening with climate change and what's happening in all these things here. And
Mm,
there's this narrative that if you don't do anything for that, it is you're a bad person and you go into this guilt thing. But I love what you said there because it doesn't have to be done on a big scale. It's
mm,
what you do within your own community. And I remember I spoke to somebody a few weeks ago and they just said, your world is your world. It's
mm,
your world. So Jay's world is Jay's world. And if Jay has an impact for that one person's world is going to change. And I think we have got, when I say we, I think the collective, we've got so caught up in the fact that, hey, we need to look at those other things. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but we get so caught up in that we forget about our own small spaces where we can actually make meaningful impacts on an everyday basis. So it's really beautiful to hear that was a narrative that you wanted to bring us aware to because we forget about that. It's very easy to forget about that. Um, but on a more personal level, we speak about your music, and that's one part of you, but you've obviously had a few challenges in your world as you wrote those. Do you want to talk about some of those challenges that you faced or that you are not afraid to talk about?
think each song from the album, particularly the middle section, deals with a challenge. And I mean, we already talked about my heritage and that kind of challenge. And that's kind of the whole concept of the track Colonized. But I also struggled a lot with trying not to define myself through what other people were defining me as. And that fits into that category as well, but it also fits into close friends and, romantic interests. And I also felt overwhelmingly alone for a long time because I assumed that community needed to be a big thing. And I was trying super, super hard to please a lot of people, trying to put on a facade, trying to be very extroverted. But when I took a step back and I didn't fully take a step back until closer to the album being released. And I've realized that I had so much in my own life that I needed to focus on instead of trying to get other people to care about my life. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, people are going to care about your life or people are not going to care about your life. You just need to live your life. It's not very complicated, but people try to complicate it. That makes sense. So yeah, certainly lots of struggles, certainly lots of ups and downs, but I think there are a lot of people out there who have it a lot worse than me. So yeah, I'm just telling my story.
Yeah, and I guess this is the important thing, that it's not a comparison about who's worse and who's, because again, your world is your world. And I always remember
Mhm.
this quote, again, it's Joe Rogan's quote. I don't know why it just stuck with me, but it goes, the hardest thing, sorry, the worst thing you've ever had is the worst thing you've ever had. And that always
Mm,
resonates to me. And because, your worst thing and my worst thing can be totally different. That doesn't negate how bad it is. So I don't think you should ever negate the fact that, hey, your challenges are a challenge, because that's your challenge. So yeah,
yeah.
just remember that there. And I guess a following question on that there is, how did you look after yourself as you were navigating this? Because it's a strain. It's a strain emotionally, it's a strain mentally, it's a strain physically. And how did Jay look after himself in this process here? Because I know music is one thing, but music was part of that thing there. But if you take
Mm.
away the music, how did you look after yourself, Jay?
Initially, it was primarily through my family, spending time with my family. Up until up until the beginning of year 13, so my final year in school, I had become too focused on me, and not enough time focused on spending time with my family. And I think during my last year at secondary school, started to focus more on spending time with my family. And the funny thing is, when you spend more time with other people and you focus on people other than yourself, you're doing yourself a favor because it allows you to breathe. It allows you to feel content that you're doing something for someone that isn't yourself. And that was the first way that I did it. But obviously, after of moving out of home, moving to a completely new city, I didn't have that support network. Sure, my mum still calls me every other day and she calls me at the most random times, but it was really strange not having that support network. And obviously, I initially gravitated towards, as you said before, towards creating stuff. But I think ultimately, just talking to God and not in the sense of wanting to have anything answered or wanting help with anything, but just being there and being present really helped me more than anything else. Yeah.
That's a beautiful share, and it's beautiful because what I took away from there was the line where you said, by not focusing on me and focusing on others, you actually find more of you. Isn't that crazy
Mm,
how that happens, right? When you give yourself to others, you find more about yourself. And again, we don't do that often. We don't do that as often as we want or as often as we can. And I think this is why there's such a huge industry now in meditation and mindfulness and well-being because
mm.
people have forgotten that this is actually something to do themselves. They can just do it themselves, but hey, I'm going to pay a lot of money to get this done when you can just, as you said, just go and talk to your whānau or talk to people that you consider that are your whānau or your family, which is important.
The interesting thing about meditation is that I feel like everybody's like, oh, I don't have time for 10 minutes of meditation today. You don't have time for 10 minutes of doing nothing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite saying, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that if you don't have enough time to meditate for 10 minutes a day, you need to meditate 20 minutes. I
Yeah.
think that's really powerful and that really stuck with me because we're trying too much, especially in this like heavily industrialized, heavily commercialized world. We'd be doing something to be maximum productivity 100% of the time. And if we're not, we're sleeping.
Yeah.
We just need some time to like chill and organize our thoughts.
I think Tana's going through that at the moment. Tana has been saying yes to a lot of things, and we had a conversation the other day, and I know Tana, this is resonating with you, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot to contemplate. There's a lot to consider. But probably to follow up on what you've just been talking about, Jay, I guess something that I'm wondering as I'm listening to all of this powerful stuff is how did you learn that music was going to be your way of, finding yourself and finding a medium to use it as a platform? Some people have journaling, some people are extroverted and, will do it through social media or, through their connections. And yeah, I guess was music always your thing or was it something you fell into? And yeah, why music? Why not? Yeah, something more, obviously, yeah, there's other ways you can connect with yourself internally. Why,
Mhm.
why music? Mm.
I think that for me, music isn't the way of expressing myself and conveying my feelings. I think that creativity as a whole and making stuff is the way that I do that. Music has just always been the most accessible format of that for me because, my mother was playing music to me when I was in the womb. She, we're, we've, our family's been very, very musical, and my parents really stressed the importance of me learning music from a young age. My mum never had the chance to take like instrument lessons when she was younger, and so she really wanted me from the age of 4 onwards. I learned piano and I learned a bunch of different instruments, which eventually just dropped off after certain periods of time. And so music was always something that stuck with me. Sure, it's had its ups and downs. Hated music for a while there, but I still really enjoyed listening to it and enjoyed how it's such an accessible form of expressing how I feel. Now that I've done music for a while, I've started to find more expression in doing multidisciplinary art. So pairing music with something else or doing something other than music entirely. And yeah, that's how music became my thing. It's just been the status quo for me for a while, but I think creativity as a whole has always been the best way for me to express my feelings because it's me being able to take how I'm feeling and interpret it in another way. I feel like journaling for me never really stuck because it's just me writing my feelings down and it wasn't something that I felt very comfortable coming back to.
Yeah.
Whereas with music, I could come back to it. Sure, there are some lyrics I listen to, like Off Crowded. I'm like, damn, I was really going through it at that time. But it's something that's very easy for me to find. Music, once I release it, it's there, it's everywhere. And, you know, ages are temporary, but music can really make emotions that stick with people, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it's a shared emotion, a lot of the things that you'll be sharing are things that people will go through, but not in the same sense, but have the same visceral reactions. Everyone,
Mm.
it's really quite funny. Humans are all different, but they're all the same. We all experience the same sort of things, but they come in very different ways, but it's the same base level, anger,
Mhm.
loneliness, greed, all that stuff. Whether we like to admit it or not, we all face those things there. And I guess music, as you said, or create a creative outlet is a way that others can relate to. Like you said before, they don't know Jay, but they know the expression that Jay is having, which is and I think I read this somewhere in your somewhere that if you change one person's world, you've succeeded. I think I read this somewhere that you
Mm.
thought about that. And I guess that's what really important. Um, Again, shifting away from music, I think one thing that I'm really interested in, and I am always fascinated about this, is your relationship with God. Has it always been
Mm.
part of you? And I ask this question because, um, again, I look at the world, and a lot of people judge you when you say you believe in God, and a lot of people just
Mm.
hide beneath, I don't believe in anything, just because they want to fit a status quo. But I've loved the fact
Yes.
that you've just been openly said, "Hey, I have my conversations with God." Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Do you want to talk about your relationship with God? Or with yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten a lot closer to God through the creative processes of the last year and a half, couple years. I've always believed in a higher power, but
Yeah.
I didn't really explore it that much until about funnily enough, a year and a half ago when I started creating the album. And yeah, I think everyone has an interesting relationship with God in the sense that they get closer and they get further at certain points in their life. But I think knowing that there is a God, no matter what God you believe in, and being able to talk, not expecting a response, just explain how you're going through. Ultimately, it helps you focus on the real root of your issues because often we just have all of these thoughts up here, but formalizing them into a conversation that we can have with God, because often there are very vulnerable things about ourselves that if we're having a conversation with somebody else, we're going to hide or we're going to downplay. Just being truly vulnerable and truly open is really the best way to learn about yourself and then address the areas in your life that you feel you could be doing better. And that sounds very pessimistic, but ultimately, I was put on this earth to part of the reason why I was put on this earth was to help other people. And so, in fixing the negative areas in my life and by conversing with God, I'm able to change myself into a better person by my beliefs and then help other people as well. So that's my relationship with God. I don't really want to talk too much on the specifics because everyone's
Yeah.
really cares about the specifics of I'm this religion, you're that religion.
Yeah. And yeah.
At the end of the day, we're all human and 95% of all of our beliefs are going to be the exact same. We're going to believe, we care about our neighbors, we don't want people dying, but we just care about the 5% that's different. So,
And
yeah.
that's so true. Because why? It's like we don't really care what your religion is or what your God is, because that doesn't actually matter. At the end of the day,
Mm.
God is God, and like you said before, we all believe the same things. And that's I'm going to tell you a story. A few weeks ago, I was in a I was running a course, and I said to people, "Hey, if you had one wish in the world, what would you like the wish to be?" And everybody said the same thing. Everybody said the exact same thing, peace and blah 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 blah. Blah. And then I just said, I was like, if it was me, I wish that every teacher would be paid the same as a doctor. And I did that
Mm.
on purpose, and I was like, and the reaction was like, oh, but you don't care about da, da, da. And I was like, yeah, those are great things, right? But can we change those things? That like we can change our world. And I'm putting this here because I want you to say that we all have the same thing, but when somebody comes with something different,
Yeah.
challenge the difference, but you don't see that actually it's still someone's wish. And it's the same
Hmm.
thing when it comes to conversations with spirituality or God or whatever. Just because somebody has a different opinion or a different
Mm.
thought, we question that there and go hard without going, actually, hey, but hey, this is, like you said before, we all believe the same thing. It's just the way it's packaged in. The 5% gets the media, 100% of the media. So,
Mm.
and the
And I
story.
think on that point, I think too much of modern society, just society in general, is spent on putting us into boxes,
Yeah.
pushing us and separating ourselves. I mean, this is very obvious at the moment with the US elections going on. You're either a Democrat or you're a Republican. But there are going to be a lot of people on both sides of the argument who believe in most of the same stuff.
Yeah.
But oh no, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat. I can't be friends with you.
Yeah.
You're a human. I can be friends with you.
Yeah.
It's not gonna tear us apart.
That's
We
right.
let it tear us apart.
100%. I think there's politics everywhere. I even think about New Zealand politics. I came to this country 20 years ago, and 20 years ago, nobody actually cared whether you're a neighbor, Labour, National, whatever. It's all the same. It doesn't actually matter. But over the
Yep.
last few elections, it became a rhetoric that, hey, oh, you're a Labour, you're National, and that means you're a good or a bad person to whatever the. And I was like, this is so crazy. And as you said, Jay, it's just about now people, some crazy thing has happened in the world where we have to fit these boxes, or someone's putting us in the boxes, and we feel like we have to justify being in a box, which is crazy, crazy, crazy,
Yeah.
crazy talk.
Yeah.
Crazy talk. Yeah. Yeah. And Jay, so I guess so we spoke about your single, but what is it like when you
Mhm.
dropped your album in September? What is that like for you? Because as you said, it was a journey.
Mm. I think once again, by the time the album came out, I was done with the album. I wanted to move on. And I really like that in the sense that I wasn't trying to stay attached to something.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can get really attached to their creative work. And so once it's released, they don't have a directive. That's something that I've been struggling with as well. But yeah, same thing. It just felt very, very surreal. We did a couple of listening parties. We had one here in Porniki, and then we had one back in Ototahi. And they were also very surreal experiences, very underprepared. Definitely need to. It's given me a lot of things to
Yeah.
prepare for next time and think about for the next album release cycle, whenever that may be. But I think that it was really good to see something creative that I'd made and I'd followed through on. Because as a kid, I had so many ideas. I had notepads and notepads full of ideas for movies and ideas for sometimes I'd even like write out HTML code and try code an entire website just on a book. And I just had all of these ideas and none of them really came into a state of fruition where I was happy with it and pleased with it. Not perfect because nothing is ever
Yeah.
perfect, but where I was happy with it. And I think that the album represents a period of my life, and it's the best I could make at that time. Now I could probably make something better. It's only like a month later, but I could probably start to work on something better. And it's given me the tools to learn and move forward. So it was more of a learning experience than anything. After the second listening party, I'm back up here. I sat down with a few of my friends and we talked about what went well and what we'd do next time. And I think that's one of the most valuable conversations and fulfilling conversations that I've ever had in my entire life.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. I
Yeah.
love how you expressed that, hey, it was a detachment of creativity,
Mm.
but also a learning journey. Talking about
Yeah.
a learning journey, I want to talk about how you navigate, you're a very calm, collected person here. But when
Thank
you're on
you.
social media, you have to put on a different persona. How do you manage that there? And I know it's
Social,
because it's socials is crazy, yeah.
yeah, social media, I really, really despise putting content out. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but since releasing my
Yes, I've
album,
noticed. I'm not as,
compared to before the album, I've posted like
yes.
3 times. Is
Yep.
that the best marketing move? No, because I should be continuing to promote my album. But it felt right. I didn't like for a while there I was vlogging and posting every single
Yep.
day. And so day one of rhyming every day until my album drops. Sure, it was fun, but because I was posting every day and because we're just trying to make as much noise as one of my friends likes to say, it feels like I don't have the time to craft what
Yeah.
I'm doing. That might work for other people, and I completely respect if it does. But for me, I really care about what I put out, and I really want it to be true to me and true to my values. And so I want the time to kind of sit with it and consider it from other perspectives. Because oftentimes we just make something, we're seeing it from one perspective. So taking a step back really helps. And going back to the album, that helped me a lot in the creation process. Just not touching the album for weeks on end and then coming back to it really helped. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I asked the question because I mean, I follow you and I noticed there was a time when you're posting, you were just coming on my feed all the time, just all the time. I was like, God, it's Jay again. And it's like, hey, cool. And my mind is like, how do you have the energy to do this and be authentically yourself? And that's the question I had myself. And then I noticed
Mm,
now it's not as much, but it wasn't a judgment. It's like, hey, this is amazing, but it's energy sapping. And as you said before, some people get energy from it, and for some people they don't. And I just have to respect that, hey, you had to go in that space there to do what you had to
mm,
do. Um,
yeah.
because hey, as you said, you're competing with the world, essentially.
Mm. Yeah, I think that the state of social media right now is super saturated, super competitive, and super focused on, feeding that little goldfish brain of ours, as opposed to giving us something that can sit with us and we can think about. And you see this trend happening everywhere at the moment. I mean, even like the education system, people are focused on tests, focused on regurgitating information in 3 hours. But honestly, doing a project where you can sit with it and write a really well crafted essay over multiple weeks with lots of research feels a lot better than just regurgitating some stuff that you've been told to learn. So that's kind of how I see social media. And that's why I've kind of taken a bit of a back seat at the moment while I focus on my objective moving forward. And I do need to get back into posting, but I want to get back into posting on my own terms, not because I think someone else wants me to post every day.
Yeah, and I love that. Um, can I ask you my final question before the last question we have?
Mhm.
As a creative working in the space, and we speak about social media, that's one part. But I love your thoughts on the impact of AI for you as you see it as a creative. So not just as a musician, but as a creative, as we see things like Midjourney, Synthesia, all these crazy tools are coming up in the whole creativity space. And as someone that's in that space there, what does that make you feel?
I think AI is an incredible tool, but at the same time, AI should not be used for a final artistic project. AI is great for research. AI is great for getting a general idea of what you're going to do. AI is great for, reviewing emails that you're going to send out to press. But I think that AI really lacks, and maybe this is something that will change in the future, but AI really lacks original creative thinking. Because, I mean, ultimately, as we all know, AI is just a machine that takes other stuff that's already out there, processes it, and repackages it in a way that you'd like to see. So if you're trying to do a creative project that is attempting to be new, it can help you with the research, it can help you with structuring your thoughts and being able to explain it in a way that's clearly. Often with ChatGPT, I'll go through an idea for a project and I'll be like, look, How does this come across to you? Can you re-explain it to me? And then I can pick apart all the flaws with what's going on. I think that using AI to imitate human work is dangerous, and I don't think that it should be done. That's just my personal opinion. I know other people who love to use AI. There's a huge thing in the music scene at the moment of people using AI voices, which can be great if you're making the beats and you want to see how your favorite rappers will sound on top. But using that as an excuse for being lazy isn't great. Kanye West, or Ye, recently dropped Vultures 2 with Ty Dolla Sign. And I noticed, and there was a few articles that came out about it that focused on how he had used an AI voice of himself on top of other rappers' work to make their verses sound like it was him rapping. And that's just lazy, you know? Yeah. Because I know that Kanye, if he puts in the time and the effort, can create an interesting verse. Might
Yeah.
not be a verse that everyone likes, but a verse that is interesting. And so we need to spend more time on crafting that stuff instead of delegating it to AI. I don't think that AI should ever be used to do the creative work for us, to do the interesting work for us. I think that AI is meant to help us with all of the foundation research kind of stuff. Eventually, hopefully, AI can help me wash my dishes so that I can focus more on creating stuff. But yeah.
We'll get Elon Musk onto that there. I'm sure
Yeah,
he'll
yeah.
make a version
With
of
this Tesla
Gronk.
bots. Yeah.
Yeah, Gronk, Tesla, and Starlink all combined. I'm sure that will get your dishes washed in no go.
Hopefully, hopefully.
Tanya, any last questions before I ask our last question?
No, I think there's been a lot to digest already. I'm sure there'd be heaps of questions, but we could be here forever, and
Mm.
and I do have places to be.
Yeah. Um, Jay, we've been speaking for almost an hour, just over an hour, and it's gone by
Mm.
really fast. But
Yeah.
one last question for you. Our podcast is called Baskets of Knowledge, and every week we invite our guests to share a piece of knowledge to put into our basket. And I'm mindful you've shared so much today. There's so much wisdom and so much nuggets that you shared today. But is there any piece of knowledge that you'd like to share with myself, Tanya, and our listeners from any aspect of your life?
Yeah. I think that a piece of knowledge that I've put into my basket lately and really digested is it's okay to focus on yourself instead of focusing on posting content, feeding other people, unless you've got a family. Then you kind of have to focus on feeding other people. But it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to figure out where you're going first before you start just going. That'd be my basket of knowledge at the moment.
I love that, and I think that's a timely piece of knowledge for myself as I navigate a new world. And I guess I saw Tane smiling there as well, and I think it's really important. So I really, really thank you because sometimes we are so busy, as you said, feeding other people, that we forget about
Mm.
feeding ourselves. And at least the saying that you can't pour from an empty cup. So that's a really powerful, powerful statement. Jay, thank you so much for jumping on today. I have mad respect for what you've done. Thank you for sharing your story, and I'm sure there's a lot more depth as well. As you go forward, there'll be a lot more coming through. But I guess for our listeners out there who want to listen to your album, where can they get access to that?
You can check it out on all streaming services. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music. Just search up Echoes. It'll be there. It's on YouTube, everywhere.
Beautiful. We'll check links on the show notes as well, so we can jump on there and have a listen. Jay, any last words from you before we wrap it up?
Not really, just be true to yourself.
Beautiful. Be true to yourself. And you heard it here, everybody. Thank you, Jay, for jumping on. A great story here. A great story about the creative process, a great story about the challenges that you faced, but also just being real about, hey, what life is like. And the fact that community doesn't have to be out there, it can just be your neighbor, your family, your whānau, your dog, your cat, that's the community. It doesn't matter where it comes from. That's really beautiful. For our regular listeners, thank you for jumping on again. For our new listeners, hopefully you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully all of you have found something useful and interesting to take away. And if you haven't, go back and listen again because you've missed out some really amazing pieces of nuggets. Till next time, don't forget to put something into your basket of knowledge. Don't forget to keep smiling, and don't forget to, as Jay said, be true to yourself. Till next time, ka kite, bye everybody. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.